Genesis. Hi, and welcome to the first UK Genesis podcast. My name is Ben.
Hi, I'm Gary.
And we're joined by Jo Waltham of Callia as the first guest of the new UK Genesis podcast. So probably the best thing to do is, Jo, if you just give us a short introduction to who you are and what you do.
Hi, well, I'm Jo Waltham. I am a web developer primarily, and I run a business called Callia Web. We specialise in WordPress websites for small businesses and bloggers, and we also specialise in the Genesis framework, so that is all we use. I've been doing this for about 3 years.
Okay. And you said that you specialize just in using the Genesis framework. Can you sort of give us a reason why that's the case? Why you don't touch any other type of frameworks, or why you don't just work with WordPress vanilla?
Okay, well, actually, the slight confession, I do have a couple of clients where I do a couple of little customizations of other themes. And mainly I do that to remind myself why I only use the Genesis framework. I came across Genesis 3 years ago. I was starting work for a client, starting working with WordPress, and that particular client said, "Oh, I really like this theme from Studiopress. Can we use this theme?" And I went, "Yeah, sure." And I suppose I just never found after that a need to use anything else. And I think once you invest your time on working out how Genesis works, you realise just how it speeds up your development time and that sort of stuff. And once you've made that investment, it's silly to not use it.
Okay. So, I mean, you said that it was one of your clients that brought you onto Genesis. Describe your typical client. Who do you work with predominantly, and sort of what type of person would be your typical client?
Well, when I started, it was mainly food bloggers. You might see in my portfolio just food blog, food blog, food blog. And then I also started work for some people in the food industry, so some cafes and a private cook. Then I've also done a lot of work with people who are starting up their business, so consultants and that sort of thing. So one-man bands, really. And then more recently, I've done some work for some bigger clients, which has been quite interesting, how bigger businesses take longer to decide and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite a different dynamic to working with solopreneurs. So typically my clients tend to be female, but I do have male clients as well. I'm quite happy to work with men or women, but typically a lot of my clients are women who just feel a little bit more confident discussing what it is they need with another woman. That's all. Okay,
so you mentioned that you've got a couple of people that you have that are not now, the bloggers that you started off with. They're more traditional businesses. Yeah. Obviously, one of the big questions that a lot of people have when they start out is, how do you move from the small blogger or the small client to larger companies?
That's a good question. And what I'm trying to work out myself right now. I mean, most of my work comes by word of mouth referral. So, for example, I was working on a food blog. This lady, her husband ran a technology magazine, and he saw what I was doing for her, so he then said, "Could you do a website for my business?" Then another food blogger recommended me to a lady who's an HR consultant for various businesses, and she then refers her clients to me, and then they tend to be much bigger businesses as well. It's funny how it's all stemmed from the food blogging industry, but it's what I started doing now more is going to networking events, and just going to I find if I go out there and just sort of say to people, anywhere you go, you say, "Oh, I'm a web developer," 1 in 10 people will sort of say, "Oh yeah, I'm thinking of getting a website." I was in the pub the other day at a Scouts committee social, and I was chatting to a guy there, and he was sort of saying, "Oh yeah, we need a new website. Come and have a chat. So, let's schedule a chat." So I'm not forcing it down anyone's throat, but I find that if you just mention that you're a web developer, then people are interested.
Okay, so it's actually quite interesting you describe yourself as a web developer. Obviously, a lot of people sometimes describe themselves as web designers or, sort of web professionals. Do you find that has any difference in terms of how people respond to you, or, do you have a particular reason why you opt for web developer rather than web designer?
Yeah, I almost feel a bit of a fraud calling myself a web developer, because I'm not a web developer like Gary's a web developer. I guess I kind of use the term because I feel I'm not a designer. So I've kind of sort of defaulted to web developer. I did toy with the idea of calling myself a web implementer, but I can code, so I feel that I can do. Sorry, my dog's just rolling around on the floor, being very noisy next to me. If you can hear that snuffling noise, it's the little dog. Yeah, sorry, I've lost my train of thread now. Yeah, so I guess really I shied away from calling myself a designer, and therefore that left me with a web developer. Yeah.
And where would you like to? Do you always want to be able to call yourself a web developer, or did you want to kind of move forwards with kind of however the bigger clients come on board and so on?
Yeah.
How do you see that changing for yourself?
I'm really starting, and it's quite hard to say that I am a business owner. I'm not a web developer. I'm a business owner. I run a web design agency because that is where I want to move to, and you can ask me why in a minute. So therefore, that's where I want to go. That's where I want to go.
Okay, next question. Why did you want to become a web design agency?
Well, there's so many different reasons, but really I want, so many different reasons. I want to be able to offer a better, a more complete, a fuller service to my clients. Sometimes when I build a website, I'm not a copywriter either, and I feel that, but I understand the importance of good copy. And so I would quite like to have a copywriter on board who can, so we can just include that in the package. I really want to have a designer on board, so I think I can produce a better quality looking website as well. And really also, at some point in the future, someone who's more into marketing and social media marketing, so I can just basically move it all along to being a real broad agency solution, marketing solution.
What benefit do you think, it's probably almost stating the obvious, but what benefit does being kind of a full stack development bring for you and for your clients, or for your clients and then for you?
Well, right now at the moment, if a client comes to me, I will send them off to someone to go and get their logo design. I would recommend a different copywriter to maybe work on the copy. Sometimes they can work through me with those. Sometimes they go direct. And I think if someone's setting up their business, they've got a lot of things that they need to get done, and I can't help but think that people tend to just want you to present a one overall solution for them. So I think it would make the process easier for them.
Okay. So one of the interesting things that you touched upon then was the idea of bringing other people on, or outsourcing it to other professionals. One thing we see sometimes in the WordPress community is this desire to do everything themselves, either because they feel that they won't have enough money left, or that they feel that sort of outsourcing would be too expensive. Have you always had that approach, or is that something that you've developed in the last year, 2 years, or within a limited amount of time?
In the beginning, I did everything because my rates were really low and I couldn't afford to outsource anything. A couple of times when I inquired about outsourcing, it was just going to cost way more than what I was charging, so it made no sense to do it. Now my rates are a bit higher. I can now afford to outsource things a bit more, and yeah, generally just get a better better quality product for my clients because of that.
So we've got a question from Angie. How do you find people to work for you?
Word of mouth. Yeah, well, as you all know, we have the Genesis Slack channel. So I have worked, with people, contacts I've made through the Genesis community, really. And yeah, Gary recommended me someone at one point, so I went and worked with them, and yeah, just generally keeping an ear out on the Slack channel who might be available to do some work, whose work I admire, that sort of thing. Just when people put out, oh, I've built this site, I sort of like make a little mental note, oh, I really like that, that sort of thing. Yeah.
What's your sort of timeline for kind of going from where you are now to having a full-blown kind of agency with kind of several people? Are you looking kind of 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? What's your mindset for that?
My 2015 goal. I hope it's okay to make this public now, Ben, but Ben's coming on board a couple of days a week for me to be the designer. And I'm kind of hoping that I will then hopefully bring a developer on board sort of 3 months after that. So therefore I can concentrate more on the sales and operations management and that sort of thing. I think that might be where I might be by the end of the year, but I don't know. I have plans, but I always feel a bit sort of skeptical. Just because I plan to do it doesn't mean it will get done, if you see what I mean. So just because I have an ambition for it doesn't mean it's going to happen. So that's where I would like to get by the end of the year, would be to have a designer and a developer working with me, and then I can concentrate on sales and operations management and project management, that sort of thing.
Is your approach to finding the bigger client jobs that's going to kind of be necessary to handle a larger staff, is your approach going to change? Are you going to kind of approach some of the big clients, or how is your marketing, your own kind of marketing for Callia Web, going to change?
Yeah, well, first of all, I need to rebrand my own site somewhat, because my site was very much, hey, I'm a freelance web developer, you could chat with me, let's get working together. So I need to rebrand that to make it more professional, more enticing to a bigger business. I need to do some marketing associated with that. I plan on going to a lot more local networking events, and actually starting to really try and get some bigger clients that are in my local area as well. And well, to be honest, and I know speaking at WordCamp London isn't going to be actually directly related to me getting clients, but because my clients aren't going to be in the audience. But I think if people see that I'm doing such a thing, then that really helps my sort of position in the community and that sort of thing. So I think clients will like to see that that's the sort of thing I'm doing, if you see what I mean.
And what's your talk on WordCamp London going to be?
It's about going freelance. So funnily enough, it's not actually a WordPress talk. It's all about, it's for those people who are, they've got a full-time job, and in the evening they're they're working with Genesis. They're working with WordPress, and yeah, it's all about those. It's for those people who are thinking, okay, I think I want to do this myself, but I don't know how to go about it. So it will be covering about should you be a sole trader or a limited company? Should you become VAT registered or not? How do you go about getting those first clients? How to just put yourself out there and say, hi, I'm available for work. And
why you should use Genesis, maybe? Why you should use Genesis?
Yeah, there will be a little section on why you should use Genesis, because it rocks.
Yeah. And this is your...
Sorry, go ahead.
Final question. This is your first talking at a WordCamp?
It's my first talk at a WordCamp, yeah. I did present at Food Blogger Connect a few years ago, which was a food blogging event, and that was about migrating from WordPress.com to self-hosted. And I have actually presented at a couple of geology conferences when I was a student and stuff like that. So I have done a small amount of public speaking, but yeah, I'm quite nervous about it.
Out of the frying pan into the fire?
Well, you know, yeah, you got to grow.
I mean, one of the things that we touched upon before was the idea of, you know, sort of trying to find a developer, and sort of touching on what Angie said. One of the things that I suppose is going to be important for you is finding somebody who maybe has experience of Genesis framework. Obviously, I mean, within the Slack group, we have a fairly good idea of how many people use Genesis, but do you think there needs to be a larger community pull towards people having a central hub of people who use Genesis?
There are a lot of people in the UK who use Genesis who aren't part of our Slack group. I know it's shocking, but they're not there, and there's a lot more usage of it than and they're not very vocal about using it and stuff like that. So I'm aware there's a lot of people out there who do know it, who we wouldn't necessarily know their names and stuff. So I would quite like to bring those people, you know, to have more awareness of them as well.
Okay. I mean, in terms of the ways and means that we can do something to bring those people together, I mean, is there anything that's in the pipeline, or is anything recently launched that might be well suited to that?
Oh yeah, launched last week. Yoo-hoo! Was the ukgenesis.co.uk website, and at the moment it's our little home for the podcast that we're doing today. It's also where we announce any meetups that we're going to do. We just had a big meetup, the first UK Genesis meetup before WordCamp Birmingham, which was a great success. 12 people came along. Yeah, we're planning another meetup around WordCamp London, and you never know, maybe we'll have a meetup when WordCamp Europe as well. Trying, you know, obviously that won't just be for UK people. Anyone in Europe who are using Genesis, we can all congregate in a bar somewhere, I'm sure. Yeah, and at a point in the future, what we want to do is have a directory of people who work with Genesis in the UK. So that would be designers, developers, trainers, code auditors, Gary. Oh, what else? What other things are there? I don't know, I can't think off the top of my head. So basically it will be a directory, and that would be useful for other developers and designers who are looking for people to partner up with, and it will also be useful for people who say they've already got a Genesis website and they want some changes to it, or they want to completely change it, or they know that they want to use the Genesis framework for their website. They can then search it for someone who's available to work for them. So it appeals to the end client and, you know, to within the industry. That's the plan.
Okay. So, I mean, I suppose that segues nicely into the next question. For you, and, you know, sort of, this will be something that we'll be asking everyone who comes onto the show. What is the biggest challenge that you have using Genesis?
Biggest challenge I have right now, I can't think of any challenges right now. When I got started, though, if I can say what my challenges were then, when I very first got started with it, I was also getting started with WordPress, coding with WordPress, and I was also getting started with PHP as well. I mean, I already knew some CSS and HTML, and I had I had previous coding experience. I learned Fortran 77 and C. That will show you how long ago that was. And so I was reading books about, you know, how to build a theme, but it was sort of like, but how does this correlate with what's in Genesis? You know, I open up the Genesis file and it just says Genesis. Where is the loop? Where is this? Where is that? So that was a real struggle, because you kind of had to learn 3 things at once. And I found that if I was reading a tutorial, it assumed that I had some knowledge that I didn't already have. So in the end, what I did is I put in the Studiopress forum, is there anyone who would be willing to give me some one-to-one tutorials? And someone volunteered Gary. So I had a chat to Gary, and I had a series of one-to-one tutorials where I could just really ask the really stupid questions, the really silly questions, the real starter questions that help me sort of piece it all together and enabled me to figure out how it all works. So I think Genesis, how it works, is very different to regular themes. So there was additional learning curve there.
So, I mean, in terms of advice that you would give to somebody who's maybe just starting out with Genesis, is that what you'd recommend, the idea of approaching somebody and having somebody teach you how to use Genesis, or is there something else that you would tell somebody who's just starting out with a framework?
Sorry, my puppy downstairs is now going bonkers. She can hear me talking. She's running around. I think there's some great tutorials out there. So the reason how Genesis is quite different, and you all think this is the same thing, is the hooks and the filters. So therefore, just start by Googling Genesis hooks and filters. And is it Nick the Geek who's got a great tutorial series on hooks and filters? Gary, do you know the one I mean?
Nick's got a tutorial series, and Chris Cree for Web Savvy Marketing has got a good beginner series for Genesis as well. And then there's the Genesis Visual Hooks plugin and kind of associated website with Chris C has done that as well.
Yeah. So I think first of all finding out what is a hook, what's a filter, what is available in Genesis, just figuring out how Genesis works and how you can customize it, and I guess taking it just one thing at a time. Start off by customizing the CSS if that's what you already know, and then once you've got through that, you think, okay, well, how do I? And then there's lots of places to get help. If you've got a particular question, you've got the Genesis WP hashtag where you can tweet out a question, and there's the Facebook group. I think there's a Google Plus community, isn't there? So as well as our Slack channel.
LinkedIn as well.
There's a LinkedIn group. So if you get really, really stuck, have a good Google first. Have a look at Sridhar's website. Do those sort of things. And if you're really stuck, then the community, the help and support I've had over the last 3 years from the Genesis community has just been amazing. I like to give back to that as well when I can. Just ask, and I'm sure someone will come along and help.
Okay, we've got a few questions then. So we've got LZ is asking, does Jo have her own starter child theme, or what do you use to start a project?
Well, I, up to now, have used the sample theme, which I had a few edits that I added to. But on my to-do list here, I've got Buy Utility Pro, Carrie's theme. So I want to go and
get
Good choice.
I
want to go and have a good look at that, and that might start being my new starter theme. I don't know. I need to have a look at that.
Okay. Another question from Andy. Hello, Angie, is do you think designing for accessibility is going to become an important selling tool to businesses, bearing in mind you just mentioned Utility Pro?
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why I was interested in that.
Do you think the accessibility is in the business aspect?
Yeah, businesses. It will be when we tell them it needs to be. I think accessibility is really hard for people who don't have any difficulties using a computer for them to understand, and therefore we've got to make them aware that it's important. And until the government steps in and starts saying websites must be accessible, I think we need to encourage businesses to do so. And I think when we bring it up with them, and we will make this accessible, well, as accessible as we can for people using screen readers and so forth. When we tell them why it's important, then that will be something that they would think, oh yeah, that's good. We need that,
I think that's a good point in that it probably will be something that the government will eventually turn around and say, you have to ensure that every website is accessible to blind people, to any other sort of group that will struggle. Say for example elderly. I think there was a discussion in the Slack group before about somebody who had started putting back in borders underneath the links because elderly people, I think it was, were struggling to find on links. I think that type of thing is going to become more and more important over the next couple of years, and in that sense, do you think it's a good idea for people to get ahead of the curve and to sort of be ready for when it actually becomes law?
I think if you're quoting a client, so say a normal business client who's gone out and got three quotes, and you've put in your quote, we will ensure that it meets these accessibility standards for these reasons. And then if the other web developers don't mention it, I would like to think that the client will think, well, hang on a minute, that sounds really important. I'm going to go with you. So I think by saying that you will be working, you will be ensuring that accessibility is just part of your process, that will also be an advantage of a client going with you than with, say, someone else.
Question from Devindra along those lines of how do you convince clients about accessibility requirements given the added cost? I suppose the real question is, should we actually be charging people extra for making sure a website is accessible, or is that actually our responsibility as web developers?
It's interesting. Remember, when mobile responsive development first started, we all charged more for a mobile, to add in mobile responsive. I don't know how many people now still have that as an optional extra, and for an extra fee we'll make your site mobile responsive. Now I don't know. I mean, I don't know about anyone else, but it's a given. So I don't know. I think if you have accessibility in mind at the beginning of the project, there's no reason why it can't be built into the project and not an additional cost. Maybe I'm being a bit naive about it, and maybe there are issues that are going to be harder to solve than what I don't know a lot about accessibility, I should point out, so I haven't got into the details of it, so I don't know whether maybe I'm being naive and it will be a lot harder than what I'm expecting, but
it's worth pointing out in the UK that it has actually been law to have accessible websites for the last 18 years. The Disability Discrimination Act, 2nd December 96, that came in, and although it didn't mention websites specifically, it mentioned about access to information. So that has been law. Those requirements then got merged into the Equality Act of 2010, which does specifically mention accessible to information on websites. So the fact that there's still many people, many businesses who don't appreciate that shows that it's still a concern. So and I think the Netherlands, Rianne will be able to tell me on that, but the Netherlands have to have, within accessibility, get the kind of A, AA and AAA levels of accessibility, and they kind of pretty much require that all, certainly the government-related websites, all AA. And I think, because Norway has recently changed, or one of the other Scandinavian countries has recently changed so that all websites now, new websites must be accessible. So the governments are aware of this, and the laws have been in place, but to actually have some kind of standout cases where it's been taken to court all the way. I think there's been a couple where the RNIB in the UK, National Institute for the Blind, have started proceedings, and then perhaps they were kind of sorted out before it actually got to a full court issue. But there's certainly the law is there, but actually having it applied and businesses knowing about it is kind of a different ballgame. So I think as developers, certainly in the UK, we need to know about this, and we need to be doing it as a matter of course, because potentially, I'm not quite sure what the legal standing is, but potentially kind of an other customer who comes back to you and says, well, you've created my website, it wasn't accessible, they could potentially, or you could be kind of not necessarily being sued, but something along those lines of you could be responsible for not having applied that, even if it wasn't in the scope that the client had given you in the first place. So it's certainly an area that you need to strongly consider from the outset, and building it in from the outset is far easier than kind of trying to retrofit for specific accessibility use cases after the website has gone live.
Gary, obviously, sort of accessibility is, as we've sort of discovered, not as difficult as people. It's not a black art like some people might be afraid of, like especially how responsive web design was viewed at first. What are the best resources out there for people who are genuinely concerned about making sure that the websites that they're building are actually accessible, especially from a UK perspective?
From a UK perspective, well, I mean, have a look at what is mentioned in the Equality Act of 2010, and there's various kind of sites that summarise what the mention of websites in that act are. I mean, there's the Genesis Accessible plugin. That's probably kind of your best choice. There's the WP Accessibility plugin. There's online tools that you can kind of test. Tenon.io is a nice new simple one that you can use. There's various tools out there. You've just got to kind of search for it, and you'll find those tools and resources. It's in terms of kind of what a developer needs to know. It's just another aspect. I mean, some of it is thinking, okay, well, what is going to be available to screen readers? So if you turn off CSS and you turn off images, can you still navigate the site? Can you just hit the tab key on your keyboard and navigate through and see the kind of textual content as needed? I mean, there's some kind of plugins out there which add some social icons and social shares to your site that are kind of for a Genesis related plugin, but it just adds a visual icon. So there's no clue for a screen reader that you currently focus on a Facebook link or currently focused on a Twitter link and so on. So it's kind of looking at those, looking at the plugins and making sure the plugin authors are aware of such things and encouraging them to handle that in a better way. If your theme has got support, so for a screen reader text class, then you can add content to the page that's specifically for screeners, so it's visually hidden, but it's not a display none because that hides it from screen readers as well, but it's visually hidden. There's a clip, CSS clip approach that you can do there, and that, for instance, if you've got a pagination down the bottom, you've got a list of numbers, and instead of just saying 1, 2, 3, you can say page number 1, page number 2, page number 3, so that gives a better kind of context. Another example is kind of the read more links. Instead of having read more, when you've got an archive of posts, you can say read more about, and then the post title, so then the next one will be read more about this other post title, so that way then the links are different, so it gives again a clue or context as to what they are. There's also things, there's something called ARIA, and specifically the kind of ARIA labels, and if you have some sort of behavior, some buttons, you can kind of say it's ARIA pressed or ARIA toggle or ARIA hidden, and these are just HTML attributes, so they are part of or they can be used within HTML5, and they can also be used in XHTML if you've got one of the older themes. So it's just a case of reading it, read the tutorials about it, even if you don't want to kind of read the specs, which can be quite dry, although they are informative about what specifically it can be used for. It's just to be aware of those things, and it's your responsibility to be aware of those things and how you can implement them within your child theme. But yeah.
Okay, so there's a question from Angie about how accessible is Genesis compared to other WordPress themes out there. I suppose this is another question for Gary.
Okay.
Don't ask me.
Yeah.
So the Genesis itself, they recently had an audit for accessibility, and I think Graham Armfield mentioned this on the Genesis office hours with Carrie. And so they did the accessibility audit, and they found some issues on the back end and the front end. Now the back end issues have pretty much all been done. Riet Veld has been doing that, and that has been committed for 2.2. So that's going to be a nice boost for those using Genesis who have got accessibility issues. And then the front end obviously is kind of half the Genesis front end, half the sample theme front end, because they're kind of still intermingled at the moment, and there's work being done on that as well. Now, what will probably happen is that there'll be an add theme support call that developers can drop in. So it'll be a one-line call that you can drop in, as well as obviously like a screen reader text for your CSS styles that will turn on those extra accessibility related screen reader text. For instance, if somebody has got a very specific front end that has got all these read mores, and suddenly Genesis starts outputting all these read more about certain post titles, then that could break designs, and yeah, which shouldn't happen whether you update Genesis or WordPress. So it'll be a filter that you can turn on and say, hey, look, I'm saying that I want support for Genesis accessible. I want these extra enhancements. I've got the CSS styles in place in my child theme, and that's fine for developers to turn on. If you haven't turned it on, that's fine. There's no change for you when Genesis 2.2 updates. Your site isn't going to break because of these extra accessibility enhancements. So it's there, but there's still some issues, I think, in some child themes. Even, for instance, like the sample child theme, the level of contrast in colors between, I think it might be links and kind of main text, or main text in the menu or the background and so on. That's a consideration, is the level of contrast between colors. So by default, or the current version of sample theme does not contrast enough. So that would be another thing that changes the default appearance of the sample theme may change. And obviously, if people are using the sample theme to start and build their own sites, the actual level of contrast isn't necessarily going to specifically matter, because presumably they'll be changing the color contrast to their own color schemes anyway, or the colors to their own color scheme anyway. But it is something that if you don't change that, it'd be nice to have that accessible from the outset.
Okay. Question from Devinder. Have you ever used themes from ThemeMidi or Zigzag Press, Jo?
I don't think so, and I'm pausing to think about it. I was helping a client the other day that he was using some theme, but I don't know where it came from. So, off the top of my head,
are there any particular theme shops that you buy from, or do you tend to essentially roll your own themes on a project-by-project basis?
I must admit, I tend to stick with the Studiopress themes. I've implemented quite a few sites with Foodie Pro, though. That's an exception. Or I write my own. I have purchased a few themes from other places, more so I can have a little look around in the code and see how they've done this or done that. Yeah, I can't. Apart from Foodie Pro, I don't think there's any other third-party ones I've used.
Not utility?
Well, I've not actually purchased it yet. It's almost it's because it's for the last few weeks I've been so busy recruiting and sorting out contracts and doing all that sort of stuff that I haven't actually started a brand new site. And I'm about to start a brand new site, a custom development site. Well, this week I've got to start it, and so purchase utility is where that's what I'm gonna base it on there. I'm gonna start with that.
Okay. So a question from Neil McLean for all of us. How do you balance Slack as a distraction tool for your work versus Slack as a useful tool?
Painfully.
I have it on all the time. It can be very distracting.
I think the hinting is in the name.
Yeah. But it's tricky, isn't it? I suppose when I really need to focus and concentrate, I switch it off. Otherwise, I tend to have it on all the time. I'm often checking out Slack on my phone, so if I've moved away from the computer, maybe I'm making a cup of tea or something like that, I'll check it out then, see if anything's interesting going on. Although, if there is someone who's having an issue that I think I can help with, I'll come back to the computer and carry on helping with them. It's not that easy to do that on the phone. But I think I get so much help from everyone else in the group that it's only fair to spend some time helping others. So it's tricky.
I'd agree with that. I mean, for me, it's very much a networking tool. I think as long as you treat it as that, it's fine. You wouldn't network 24/7 or 8 hours a day. You've still got to be productive with your time. But I agree in the sense that, it's been very useful for me. I'm still at that point where I'm learning more and more about code, and probably in the last month or two, I've really cracked PHP now, at least I can go to the codex and I can look at anything and understand what I'm doing. And that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for help that I've received from Slack. So I think it's one of these things, like you've said, if I've got a project that I need to complete, it's pretty much off, and the only notifications I have are when people direct message me, because I think it's quite rude if you don't get back to them within a certain amount of time. But other than that, if I've got something that I've got to get done, it's off. Otherwise, I'll have it open once every hour, 2 hours. I'll check and see what's going on and see if there's anything that's I can help out with.
I'm probably similar as well, is that, if there's work to be done, it turns off. Otherwise, it sits there. I also use it to kind of communicate with my subcontractors as well. So it's sometimes that's needed open, even if I don't want to be distracted by kind of the main channels that are people asking for help or code reviews or talking about paid gigs and kind of latest software and kind of some of the other channels we've got on the accessibility and business and so on. So yeah, it's a tool. You just like whether you have Slack or Skype, or if you're still back on ICQ, IRC and things like that. That if you know that you're going to get distracted by a kind of notification sitting there waiting to be read, then you need to turn it off. It's no different than any other tool. So, one tweet that came in from Pilcrow and Pixel regarding accessibility in business. He says it's worth remembering for businesses that the disability pound is worth 80 billion British sterling a year amongst UK's 11.9 million disabled people. Now, I mean, that's a huge number of kind of business revenue that's floated around there that kind of somebody needs to grab and kind of use and take hold of and so on. I'd also argue kind of 11.9 million disabled people, but there may very well be other users who don't classify themselves as disabled but still have accessibility issues. So it's not just a finite number. In some ways, most people have probably got accessibility issues. So even people say who just wear glasses, you have a visual aid or an aid to help you to see things. So although you might not necessarily need the website to change or be different, perhaps someone wearing glasses, they do need to be able to increase the size of the text, or they do need perhaps some different colours and so on. So even those who wouldn't traditionally be classing themselves as disabled may still have accessibility issues to account for.
The other thing as well to bear in mind is that while people who are actually browsing your website or browsing your client's website might be, young, they might be their marketing managers, they might be sales managers, they might be engineering managers if they're a B2B company, the people who are making the decisions can often be a little bit older. And in that sense, if you're putting your client in a position where they can't view their website, you could potentially be losing them business. I mean, it's not necessarily going to be every single situation, but it only takes one person to be sort of partially sighted or, some other way that they require another tool that they can't use on their website, that you could lose your client millions of pounds of business.
Yep, absolutely.
So another question from Devinder. Do you design and develop everything yourself or outsource some parts? I think we've touched upon that in the sense that you pretty much do outsource everything. But I suppose an interesting question is that the case with every project now, or are there still some projects that are below a certain threshold where you develop and design everything yourself?
Well, I get quite a lot of where I'm working with a lot of startups, people with not much budget. I do a lot of WordPress implementation jobs, which is where I take an existing theme, set it all up for them and customize it for their branding, help them put their content up, give them the training so they know how to keep it updated and stuff like that. So those projects I tend to do them just myself. I only outsource design when so far when the client has actually asked for mock-ups first and that sort of thing. Otherwise, if I was working for clients, I would be building and designing at the same time. So I guess design in browser. So if a client wanted mock-ups, that's basically when I thought, right, I really need a designer, because I'm just not going to try and learn how to use Photoshop for doing that sort of thing. Although I was using Sketch the other day, and yeah, that's pretty cool. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so sorry, I've forgotten the question now.
It was, is there a certain website, a threshold by which you still do everything in-house, or is there
So yeah, these WordPress implementations I tend to, but I mean, when you're coming on board, Ben, I will consider you in-house. So yeah.
Okay. Looks like that's pretty much all the questions that we've had.
Have you used any other framework other than Genesis? Before Genesis?
No, because literally I started using WordPress. I did something using the 2010 theme. The next project I did was was it Enterprise? I can't remember what one, or Corporate, one of those themes, which was a Studiopress theme, and I have literally, I've not built a site using anything else. I've gone in and helped people edit their existing sites that are using something else, but I've not used any other. Oh yeah, I had a tinker around with Thesis in the beginning as well. I've forgotten that. Yeah, but that was in the beginning, and then I came across Studiopress and I didn't use it anymore.
Okay, Angie asks, do you always offer training or as an option?
I always offer my clients a 1-hour training session, which can sometimes be 1.5 hours, 2 hours, and what we actually cover in that will depend on how familiar they are with WordPress. So if it's someone who's never used WordPress before and is actually a little bit unsure about just using the whole computer situation, we will literally just cover how to add a post or how to edit a page or how to change, a few sort of things. And then I just say to them, once you've mastered that, come back to me, and then we can do another training session if you want. If it's someone, obviously a lot of my clients in the beginning were bloggers, so they were very experienced at using WordPress. So we would cover, I don't know, a little bit of SEO 101, must fill out your meta titles and your meta description, don't forget your alt text, and go through all of that sort of stuff. So I kind of gauge it a little bit. A few clients then will want a follow-up tutorial. And what I've recently done for those who need a little bit more hand-holding, let's say, is I've purchased the WP 101 video tutorials plugin. So I install that on my client's site, so therefore they can just go back and refresh themselves using those videos as well. But at WordCamp Birmingham, what was it? Was it Patrick Duffy? Do you remember? Yeah. From WP Applied, was it? WP Applied? Yeah. Was talking about his training course. And I'm going to drop him a line and basically I think I'd quite like to sit on that and assess it, and then what I would maybe do for some of my clients is recommend that they go on a separate training course as well, because I mean I think I do a reasonable job training my clients on how to use WordPress and stuff, but I'm aware that there's always people who can do stuff better if that's what their specialism is. So.
Do you have any set of go-to plugins for either Genesis specific plugins or general plugins for a typical site?
I do like the Genesis simple social icons. There it is. No, so I've got it. That's not a Genesis specific one, that actually, is it? So I tend to use that because I like how I can customize the colors and keep it in design. Although I think, isn't that one of the ones that has a bit of an accessibility issue, Carrie? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly the one I was avoiding mentioning earlier, but yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't call it out. Yeah. So I really like that. So that's in the back of my mind as well. I know that's a bit of an issue, so I need to think about that. And the Genesis social share, I quite like that one too. Genesis e-news widgets, you know, if the client's going to have a MailChimp sign up. I always install Yoast now, although that isn't Genesis specific.
The WBSEO.
Yeah, that one. What else do I always install? Oh, yes, Lead-In. Oh, well, no, I don't install this on my client site as such, but this is we were talking about it at WordCamp Birmingham. I've been using this plugin called Lead-In, which basically, I mean, I use it on my own site, but I'm actually beginning to think, actually, this would be really useful for my clients as well. Why am I not doing this? And that basically, it tracks people as they go around your site, and then if they fill out a form, so an inquiry form, they then get sort of registered in your database as, hey, this person came to your site from Google, they visited this page, this page, this page, this page, and they filled out this form. They came back to your site the following day, you know, so you can, you know, or they've been to your site 3 times before they filled out this form. And it also now gives you, if they've used an email address that they've used on social media, it will give you their social media accounts and stuff as well. So you can get quite a nice little bit of information about that person before you even reply to them. So I am beginning to think, so hang on a minute, why am I not using that on my client site? That would be really useful. So that's a new one to go on my list of plugins for clients.
Another question on the Twitter. Have you ever used any drag and drop page builders before? No.
I purchased Velocity Page, and I had a play with it, and I then didn't. I haven't used it again since. I'll be honest. And nothing against Velocity Page, but it was sort of like, I don't know, there was just, yeah. So the answer is no, I haven't used any drag and drop.
Fair enough. Just trying to think. Any other general tools that you consider sort of essential to helping you run your business in terms of web development?
Well, I guess let me think about what tools I have. I use Xero as my accounts package. That enables me to do reasonable invoices, do my bank reconciliation. It means I can just email my invoices to my Xero account and then line them all up. It means I don't need a bookkeeper, although I do have an accountant. So Xero. I use, what's it called? I closed the window. I always get it muddled up with it. Teamwork for a project management tool to try and just keep a list of everything that's got to get done and by when. Gosh, there must be so many other things that I use, but I can't think of them at the moment.
What's your editor?
Oh, I use Sublime Text, but I don't really. I'm only really newly using that. Before that, I was using BB Edit all the time, just because that was something I was familiar with when I got my Mac. So I'm using Sublime Text, but I'm certainly not using all the features and functionality of Sublime Text. I'm just going to look. I use Transmit for FTP, Desktop Server for local development. Now that was really important. Before I moved to Wiltshire about 18 months ago. Before that, I was living just on the inside of the M25, and I had 60 megabits per second broadband. So I used to think, well, what's the point in developing locally? I just FTP it up, you know. It's not a hassle. When I moved here and my internet connection went down to 8 megabits per second, I suddenly decided that I would quite like to learn how to use a local development server. So yeah, desktop server is pretty key. I use Dashlane for password management. What else have I got in my toolbar there? Yeah, that's about it really. That's all I can think of anyway.
Okay. Any other questions, Gary?
Not from me at the moment.
I think we're coming up close to the top of the hour, and as Joe will quite happily admit, or maybe not happily admit, that you have to run off and get the children.
Yeah, I have to go. I have to go at 3 to get. Yes, I might suddenly dash out. Otherwise, I don't get a parking space, and it's all a nightmare. Then my daughter's got to walk further than she expects, and yeah.
Where can we find you online, Joe?
You can find me on Twitter as Jo Waltham, or I'm also got a Callia Web Twitter account, but I must admit I'm not very good at responding there. You can find me at calliaweb.co.uk. I've got a contact form there if you've got any questions. You can also sort of find me at the ukgenesis.co.uk website if you have any questions about that. There's a contact form on there as well. You'll find me in Slack, Jo Waltham. You'll find me, where else might you find me? Yeah, that's about it.
The next UK Genesis meetup in London?
You can find me at the next UK Genesis meetup in London, which will be the, oh gosh, testing me now, 5 p.m. on the 20th of March at the Premier Inn bar. And it's the Premier Inn I'm staying at, and I can't remember which one it is. Is it Angel?
Angel in Islington, I think.
Yeah, so which I think is pretty close to the venue. So we're going to meet up there, and if you want to come along to that, then just fill in the form on the UK Genesis website, ukgenesis.co.uk/meetups. Fill in the form just so that's more okay, just so I've got an idea of how many people are coming, and if for any reason we have to suddenly change a venue for what reason, I can always then tweet you or text you or whatever to let you know that there's been a last minute change of plan. Yeah.
Okay, so other than that, if obviously the whole point of this podcast is very much to give people like yourselves who are based in the UK and use Genesis an opportunity to get more exposure within the community. So if you would like to appear on the show, I would highly advise going to the UK Genesis website and also filling out a contact form. If you just put as a subject that you would like to appear on the show, just put a little bit about yourself, how you use with Genesis, and we'll be in touch with you. Other than that, we will be back, I believe, in 2 weeks, which you're asking me to do now, do math, the 5th of February. It'll be the same time. And we'll be announcing who we will be interviewing fairly soon. But from me, Gary, and Jo, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you in a fortnight.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.